Honorable members, I now put the question that this House adopts the report of the National Government Constituency Development Fund for 4 constituencies committees laid on the table of this House on Thursday, 1st August 2024, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4) of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015, and paragraphs 5(2) and 10 of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Regulations of 2016, approves the list of nominees for the appointment to the following 4 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Webuye West Constituency, David Lutali Sakari, representatives for persons living with disabilities. Isiolo South Constituency, Wako Abdi Wako, male adult representative. Nandi Hills Constituency, Henry Kirwa Mutai, representative of persons living with disability. Mumias East Constituency, Joseph Owino Odero, male adult representative. And Philip Munyenyi Wanga, male adult representative. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 10, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 38 of 2024, second reading.
Give the chairperson budget the mic.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to move that the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, that is National Assembly Bill number 38 of 2024, be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, I wish to take just a brief moment to brief members that, as we are all aware, we had made a budget that was to be implemented in the year 2024-2025. The budget is two-sided, the revenue side and the expenditure side. When we came before this House, Honorable Speaker, we were able to debate and actually pass the expenditure side of the budget and also pass the appropriations bill, which became an act. Consequently, Honorable Speaker, afterwards, as we know, the revenue side had challenges, and the revenue-raising measures that were there, Honorable Speaker, were not able to be realized because of the challenges that we all now understand and know. And in that respect, then, the government had to, and us here in Parliament, had to come up with measures to have a budget that balances the expenditure and the revenue side of the budget. And Honorable Speaker, therefore, this has necessitated cuts across all government agencies, Honorable Speaker, and also across the 2 levels of government, so that we are able to balance the anticipated expenditure together with the expected revenue, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the national government side, we have come before this House and already have done the appropriations, the supplementary budget, which was signed yesterday by the President. It is now an act. Honorable Speaker, what we were seeking to do is to balance the budget through 2 ways. One, borrowing a little more, which we borrowed 176 billion more than we wanted to borrow as a country. But we have also consequently added up cutting around 145 billion of anticipated expenditure, especially that amount is only in the national government, which incorporates the judiciary and parliament. Honorable Speaker, then, because of the situation we find ourselves as a country, we have had to do something unprecedented. And actually, all that we have done is unprecedented. In the budget-making process in Kenya, there is no budget that was amended through a supplementary budget barely a month after the signing of the appropriations bill. This is the first time. The other unprecedented thing, Honorable Speaker, is that it is the first time again that we are actually amending the the Division of Revenue Bill, Honorable Speaker, which is actually divides money vertically between the national and the county governments. Honorable Speaker, in a nutshell, is that this House had already passed the equitable share to our counties to a figure that has never been there before of 400.1 billion shillings. Upon revision of the expenditure side necessitated by the collapse of the revenue-raising measures, the amendment before us, Honorable Speaker, is then to also have a haircut in the equitable share from the proposed 400.1 billion to 380 billion, Honorable Speaker, so that all the levels of government apportion the loss of anticipated revenue across the board, Honorable Speaker, and therefore the nutshell of this amendment of the Division of Revenue is actually to decrease the amount from 400.1 billion to 380 billion, in line with the realities we find ourselves as a country. Honorable Speaker, from the two levels of government, which is national government and the county governments, even within the national government, everyone has had to take a haircut. And some have actually had their heads chopped, Honorable Speaker, because of the drastic cuts that we had to then effect. Across the arms of government, the executive is losing money, Parliament is losing 3.7 billion Kenya shillings, Judiciary is losing around 2 billion Kenya shillings. Everyone, every arm of government, Honorable Speaker, and all levels of government has to come in and go through the austerity measures, Honorable Speaker, the ones we are effecting today, and especially in the counties through the Division of Revenue. Honorable Speaker, I also want to brief this House that the Constitution permits a floor of 15% when it comes to dividing the revenues through the equitable share. Honorable Speaker, constitutionally, we are already past that amount in the current proposal, because at 380 billion shillings, we are already at 24.4%, and therefore it is way beyond the constitutional requirement. Honorable Speaker, something else we have had to do is that in our report, we have recommended, even in the bill, Honorable Speaker, something else that we have not done in this House before. And our proposal as the Budget Committee is this. In anticipation in future what we've been seeing, Honorable Speaker, if you look at the current supplementary appropriations bill, which is basically the main budget, we have to budget for 68 billion shillings of carryovers. Carryovers meaning we have cherry-picked a few items, which even if the year has lapsed, those budget lines cannot lapse. They total to 68 billion. However, the entire amount of carryovers, monies that we are not funded by the the Treasury, by close of last financial year, was 221 billion Kenya shillings. It therefore means our revenue-raising measures as of last year, through debt and revenue, ordinary and A&A, was short of 220 billion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker. Now, this is the debate I invite this House, Honorable Speaker. In light of that, we have to budget 13 billion Kenya shillings to CDF, carryovers. We have to budget for over 30 billion Kenya shillings to our counties as carryovers. We have to budget for 23 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, 21 to 23 billion, as carryovers for pensions. What am I trying to say, Honorable Speaker? The way the government should work is that by the fall of 30th June, Kenya operating under what we call T+2, After 2 days, there should be no disbursement from the National Treasury for the previous year's budget. Basically, that's what it means. But then, because some of these things like CDF, we have already gone for public participation. These monies, I mean, you have gone through the wrong hole. There is no way then we could have, or CDF could have been denied this amount. Monies for pensions, whether the year lapses or not, is not a problem of the pensioner. They had to be paid. County governments alike. They have already done their budgets approved by the county government. They need the money. So we have 68 billion we are funding now, money for last financial year. And as we know, because governments are run through time, government is not in the business of wealth. Government is always in the business of cash flow and revenue. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, since you cannot run government through receivables, you cannot run government through assets, you only run through money that is coming in and out. We have done one thing. In anticipation, we have a year where the revenue-raising measures do not measure up. Honorable Speaker, what do we do as a country? We anticipate to raise 2.6 trillion Kenya shillings in ordinary revenue this year. What happens when we go to 30th of June next year and we have only raised 2 trillion? What would happen? That's the debate I'm inviting this house. What would happen, just to repeat, if we anticipate to raise 2.6 trillion, what would happen by 30th June that KRA has only raised 2 trillion? What would happen? Honorable Speaker, we have suggested in our report and in this bill, when there is a shortfall in revenue raising, the two levels of government must carry that burden proportionately. Because then what happens? Even county governments themselves, Honorable Speaker, they also usually project their revenue. But many times, they have a shortfall. Then, is it a new thing? No. In government of Kenya, ever since for the last many years, we have had shortfalls in revenue. In this year, I'm repeating, we have a shortfall of 200 billion. The national government is carrying this burden alone. And national government, I mean executive, judiciary, and parliament. Honorable Speaker, we just have to bite the bullet. And I'm anticipating a period where we have a drastic fall in anticipated revenue. Then we make the national government carry the burden. They may actually end up even not being able to pay salaries. Why? Our development expenditure as of this budget that we passed the other day is 640 billion. What if we had a shortfall of 640 billion as a country? Then it means we are obligated to fund all the other levels of government, but the national government will have a deficit in funding even PE, personal emoluments. That is what we must think of as a house. When there is a shortfall, the two levels of government, at the same percentage, they carry the same burden. But when there is a surplus, if there is a surplus, that could also be incorporated, that also they be considered, though we have not had a surplus in many years, Honorable Speaker. So that is the main highlight in this proposal, Honorable Speaker. I know there are provisions of the Constitution. We have had to sit down with our legal experts, but we decided this debate must start. Because if it doesn't start, Honorable Speaker, then we are living a lie as a country. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I also want to buttress the point that we have also allocated over 40 billion Kenya shillings in conditional grants to our counties. We have done everything in support of devolution. As the budget committee, we have, beyond these resources, as I've said before, we have also appropriated 44 billion in conditional grants. Honorable Speaker, we have also appropriated 8 billion shillings, managed for equalization fund, which is majorly supported and managed by our governors. They are doing a fantastic job. This does not want to show that there is anything against anyone. It is basically where we are as a country. That Parliament, for the first time, I saw something I have never seen. Members of Parliament rising and saying, cut our CDF, which we cut by 10 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. Members of Parliament standing and saying, for the sake of our country, cut our travel budget, cut any other non-core expenditure, which we ended up cutting 3.7 billion shillings. We are just requesting the same now percolates across all levels of government so that we live within our means as Kenyans, very unequivocally and directly and eloquently suggested that we must do. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I wish to request the very able Vice Chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. I beg to, with those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and request the very able Vice Chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, the elegant Mary Amase, to second this motion.
Very well, Mary Amase.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Speaker, I beg to second the report on the consideration of the Division of Revenue Bill, Amendment Bill 2024. Honorable Speaker, I will be very brief, and I just want to make it very simple. Honorable Speaker, we suffered a shortfall in revenue, in a projected revenue. And this was occasioned by the failure to enact the Finance Bill 2024-2025. As a result, this necessitated the rearrangement and rationalization of the estimates, and that we've already done through the Supplementary Estimates 1 of 2024-25. Honorable Speaker, the purpose of this bill, the purpose and object of this bill is to amend the Division of Revenue Act 2024 to provide for the equitable sharing of revenue between the national and county government, taking into account that shortfall, taking into account the downward revision of the projected revenues, which we just witnessed as a result of the collapse of the Finance Bill. We had initially projected a projected revenue of 2948 billion. But now that has been revised downwards to 2602.1 billion. That brings us to a downward revision by 346 billion, which the chair has explained that it has to be borne by both county and the national government. And that therefore means that the county government shareable revenue has come down by 20 billion. And the national government will come down by 325 billion. So basically what we are saying, the amendment in the bill, subclause 51A, actually seeking to protect county governments, such that at any one time, if we have a shortfall, it is limiting the amount which the county governments, or that shall be borne by the county governments, not to exceed 15% of the shortfall. So, in other words, the amendment is seeking to protect the county governments and limit the amount to which they shall bear to not to exceed 15% of that shortfall. So, Honorable Speaker, this is a very straightforward bill, like I've said, and whenever we have a shortfall, Kenyans have told us we have to live within our means. Then we have to share whatever challenges that accrue from some of the actions or the choices that we make as a country, because we've been told choices have consequences. So, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I want to appeal to the county governments. They will be receiving 380 billion. I know it has come down from what we had initially projected.
But I want to appeal to county governments to prioritize their needs, to look into the issue of the pending bills and make sure those contractors, those who are given tenders even by their predecessors, services who are rendered and offered, be given first priority and be paid their monies. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I second.
Very well. Honorable members, I propose the question that the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 38 of 2024, be now read a second time. No, there's serious interest on this one. And the first to have a bite is Honorable Christopher Aseka, Huisero.
Thank you, Speaker. I also rise to join my chair and vice chair in supporting the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2024, which allocates revenues between the two levels of government, that's the national government and the county government. Honorable Speaker, national government in this bill will receive about 2.2 trillion. The county governments are going to be allocated 380 billion, and also 7.8 billion are going to equalization fund. Mr. Honorable Speaker, this is within the constitutional provisions whereby the 380 billion being taken to government is within over 15%. It is 24.2% of the national revenues. Mr. Speaker, as we do this, we are coming out from a situation which was a withdrawal of a finance bill that led to the shortfall of the revenues by about 365 billion. This one now means that every arm of government is going to bear the loss, and the county government loses about 20 billion from 400 billion, making it 380 billion. As we do this, Mr. Speaker, we need also to call upon county governments to ensure that they improve on their own source revenue mechanisms to ensure that they generate as more revenues as possible at the county levels. But as we say this, Mr. Speaker, we also need to ensure that these monies that are going to county governments and national governments are put into good use. For example, Mr. Speaker, as per the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, there are clear roles that the county governments are supposed to play. One of the roles is to provide water, healthcare, to support agriculture and infrastructure. But Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, and a case in point like in Huisero constituency where I represent, we have water projects that have stalled for even 4+ years. The Misango water projects that is under the county government has been an eyesore in the eyes of the residents of our constituency. And I want to call upon the county government of Kakamega to prioritize the implementation of this project to ensure that Kenyans within that region in Huisero access safe and clean water. Mr. Speaker, also we have the issue of healthcare, and we have issues with our hospitals, the dispensaries, health centers, where our people are really suffering because of lack of enough drugs in those facilities. We call upon the county governments to prioritize supply of drugs in our hospitals and employment of nurses and doctors to ensure that our people are well treated. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, I call upon even the national government also to ensure that these funds, as we do unlock this bill, are released to respective government departments and agencies to ensure that the implementations of projects that are earmarked in this budget are done in time, and also to ensure that all the pending bills within the sectors are paid to avoid the challenges that small and big suppliers and contractors are facing in the country. Mr. Speaker, I support.
The Honorable Murugaru Gitonga, I'm not sure you want to speak on this. Proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the bill. In fact, we must live to reality now. We are living in very difficult times, and we have to think prudently about what exactly we are going to do so that the governments run. We had the bill which had, for the county governments, 400 billion Regrettably, the bill fell through. This means, in essence, that the three arms of the government and the county governments have to actually tighten their belts, because expectedly we have to cut on allocations. And this is why we would implore on the county governments to bear with the 20 billion cut which they have to suffer. The same has applied to the executive, to this House, honorably, and also to the judiciary. By these cuts, it doesn't mean that county governments would not be able to provide the essential services or pay the recurrent expenses. This 20 billion possibly would have gone into pay rises, which must now be frozen. It must also ensure that travels which are not necessary, whether for seminars, whether for benchmarking or whatever it is county governments have to do, have to be cut. Expenses on vehicles, expenses on personnel, all this must go down. We know very well that our county governments most times are extravagant. In fact, there is a hue and a cry out there that while work done by CDF is visible, not much can be talked about the county governments. It's the high time the county governments live to their expectations, that the citizens over there have to get the services that they deserve. We know very well that there has been an employment embargo put in place, that government will not employ, and county governments also have to adhere to this. But that notwithstanding, then we have the natural attrition, which we must always fill in so that there is no vacuum. We have had the surpluses, if at all realized. If those are to be shared equally, then the burdens which arise from this must also be shared equally, and county governments must live with the cuts. Therefore, this amendment to the supplementary act, this amendment to the Appropriations Act is timely and in line with what we have done in the supplementary appropriations bill, which is now an act of parliament, which we are relying on for the time being until another one is actually put in place. Of course, people are asking, what happens now that we lost the 2024 the 2024 Finance Act, and we have also recently lost the 2023 Finance Act. The position in law is that the Supplementary Appropriations Act, which is now in force, becomes the operative law. And we will have to live with that until another one is put in place. With those remarks, I beg to support.
The Honorable Robert Basil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the floor. I raise to support the Division of Revenue Bill on a number of reasons. It's good to live within our means, Mr. Speaker, and that was because the Finance Bill 2024, the Gen Zs and many Kenyans say the money or the taxations were too much for them to bear. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the 380 billion for county government, Mr. Speaker, that money is going to support all the services that have already collapsed. Mr. Speaker, the money will go rightly to pay salaries as well as pending bills, Mr. Speaker. It's important, Mr. Speaker, to say that the money must be used prudently. We have seen a lot of wastage in the county governments, particularly when it comes to usage of this money, Mr. Speaker. So we want that funds to be used wisely so that citizens can see the value of their taxes, Mr. Speaker. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, the equalization fund, 7.80 billion, Mr. Speaker, should be distributed equitably based on the baseline data, Mr. Speaker. Some areas have been marginalized since 1963, Mr. Speaker, and it is important that constituencies that are going to be selected to benefit from the equalization fund should be selected based on data that is available depicting or exhibiting disparities that has existed over the years, Mr. Speaker. When I look at the 2.5 trillion for national government, Mr. Speaker, this is money that is going to go to support national government functions, Mr. Speaker. And I do say that it's important to promote accountability and transparency when these resources are going to be spent or implemented to support national government functions, Mr. Speaker. I think it's also important to underscore the importance of equitable distribution of resources and national government to respective constituencies, Mr. Speaker, so that at least across the country we can have uniform development, Mr. Speaker. Because if you look at our country, we have a very outstanding or resounding disparities of different areas across the country, simply because resources are not promptly utilized to support services or to support functions, both at national and the county level, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I do support the report or the bill, the Division of Revenue Bill, and request that the respective points are put across be respected when these resources are being utilized. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I submit.
Very well. The Honorable Julius Ruto, Cases.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for accommodating me to contribute in support of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill of 2024. Mr. Speaker, as colleagues, members of Parliament have said, and as we are aware of the unprecedented events that preceded the closure of last financial year, where the Finance Bill 2024 was rejected, all of us have found ourselves in this situation. It is a unique situation that has never ever happened before, and probably we are writing a new story in the Parliament of Kenya, where a situation like this has taken us to such discussion that probably it wasn't there before had been predicted that would happen. We are aware the provisions of the Division of Revenue Act, Section 2, where there is a shortfall on revenue collection, the national government bears the loss. And when there is a success in exit of revenue collection, the national government does the same. But for this particular purpose, Mr. Speaker, we have been taken to this situation. And it's not a unique situation that is only caused by national government activity, but rather it is a process that was stopped by situation that arose by rejection of finance bill. It is the right time that we must speak to ourselves. What do we do at such a scenario and occasion? Mr. Speaker, the reduction of what had been earlier provided for under Division of Revenue and under sharing of equitable resources as per the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya from 410 to 380 is something that has to be accepted by all quarters. And I want to pray that the other side of this Parliament have also to find a reason to support the same. Why? Because as much as we would wish to take our hard position, the reality is that we don't have resources. That as we speak, Mr. Speaker, the development money for national government has been reduced to the tune of almost 150 billion. It means programs worth 150 billion will not be executed, leave alone even the intended programs to be executed. We are worried of the pending bills, programs that are ongoing, and resources have not been provided for. And therefore, it is high time now we need to discuss around Division of Revenue Act and amendments that is required, so that when such a scenario we are found in, we are able equitably be able to share the burden, so that as we seek to adjust from the national government point of view, from Parliament, from executive, from judiciary, every quarter has been affected. So the both the government units again should sit and be able to relook at their allocations on the other side. But nonetheless, to say this, Mr. Speaker, it is high time also we need to speak to our own source revenue from the county governments, because I know they have been going through challenges in meeting their targets. It is high time now that this particular scenario speaks to them, so that their intended development agenda and programs to spur and grow devolution now will be supported effectively by the resources that is endowed within them. because most of the county governments have never ever managed to meet their targets. And if you look at the reasons behind it, is poor plans, poor policy in place, poor revenue collection measures, or even misuse of the same, enforcement of the same. Mr. Speaker, this particular scenario helps us now to speak to the Council of Governors, to speak to the devolved government units, so that they begin to relook at the laws governing the on-source revenue. Because if they're able to maximize their collection, the same way now we are pushing ourselves to the last elastic limit, on the other side, if they're able to push further, they will reduce that direct dependency on the core functions that they have to discharge for the same to be able to meet the mandate of the governments. Another issue, Mr. Speaker, that I want to put across is this, that even as we seek to put ourselves into a scenario of push and pull, it is high time also as Kenyans now we begin to look at the scenario and the situation we have been put in place. Probably other issues or other discussion need to come around. What are we going to do henceforth? Because, Mr. Speaker, you are aware, there is a case in court now, a ruling by the Court of Appeal invalidating the Finance Act of 2023. We are aware the Finance Act of 2023 was seeking to raise additional revenue of not less than 200 billion. I know appeal has been made to the Supreme Court, but who knows the outcome of that? I don't want to preempt the outcome of the ruling of the Supreme Court, but should it uphold what the Court of Appeal has said, already we are going into problems. And I think it is high time now as Kenyans, we need to ask ourselves the situation where we are in, where are we going to go? Already, if rulings of the court comes in, affecting the already affected, the basket that we have. Now it's going to affect it further. Now we are discussing on division of revenue. I don't know whether we are aware supplementary 2 should be coming very soon. And this supplementary 2 should be coming. Who is going to survive in this? Will devolution survive? Will the national government survive? So, Mr. Speaker, I want to call on every other agencies that we want now to tread carefully, lest we collapse the country. Because with the advent challenges that is going to affect on existing framework of revenue raising, then we are going to collapse critical services that Kenyans are requiring. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this particular amendment and to request that henceforth now we need to have a discussion on how to absorb the reduction of the revenues, because we cannot survive on these ones. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Beatrice Elachi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support the report and to appreciate so far our Budget Committee and Chair for the work they have done. I know it's been a very, very tough year where we've had to repeat and to ensure that we just get into the timelines and the lines and the inspirations of what Kenyans want. And to appreciate that, yes, every sector will have to bear the burden, but more importantly, maybe it's going to teach us also a lesson on how to look at our budgets without really putting so much. And let's see how we perform with this. And it will give us now a way forward on what the President has always said, that he would wish that there will be a time when we have a budget that is itemized. And this will help us. But I know it is up to us in whatever little we have, and that is what we should be asking, Mr. Speaker. That is there a way we can have prudence in how we are going to dispense the resources that we are given based on what we have. The other thing we should be asking ourselves as Kenyans is that how good is it that we can go back and reflect and ensure that slowly by slowly we come out of IMF and all these things that have brought us to where we are today. But I also want to ask Kenyans that we also need to understand that you will not expect a lot. And so you cannot come again and start blaming. But the little we have, and that is why it is important, if it is one project, let Kenyans see that one project. Let it come out, Mr. Speaker, as yes, we had this little, but we have one project, and the project is seen, the project is with quality, and can be quantified that it has spent public resources in prudence. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, as you look at the reports, we go now to the county governments. And I think even as we readjust everything, it is time we must also ask the county governments, to now come openly, transparently, on how much do they collect from their local revenue. Is it able to now become a fund or resources that can be assisted to support where we've had the deficit? Because that is one thing. It's like in Kenya, it doesn't matter. Yes, we have local revenue. Nobody cares about it. Nobody even says how much is it. And then in the end, you don't even, but we are here saying we have reduced 20 billion. You want to tell me in the local revenues of each county, Mr. Speaker, even if they collect 1 billion, these are 47 counties, you'll find across 47 billion shillings. It will even surpass. And so those who are able to collect even more, Nairobi can collect even more, Mr. Speaker. You will find even Nairobi, if well organized, we can have beyond of 40 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, we can even become the first county that can even share their revenue in terms of giving loans to other counties. So it is the systems of how we collect revenue. And this thing of saying we have deficits at the national level, Mr. Speaker, it has to now start balancing with that we must also know how are the counties performing. Is there a way the Senate can bring in incentives that if you perform better and if you collect better, then there is a parameter that you can be added more revenue because you are collecting and spending well in terms of the development that you are giving your people. Mr. Speaker, the other thing we should be asking ourselves, and this should be within education. You realize, Mr. Speaker, we are about to now, in the year 2025, we shall be phasing out the 844 system. And so we are moving slowly by slowly. But we should also be now trailing ourselves that we must think that CBC must get it right from the word go in terms of having education, free education as they move. And it can happen, it can work, and we must come out of this cry so that we start now reorganizing our resources ourselves. Mr. Speaker, the other thing we should be telling now our citizens, you remember the courts also now quashed the 2022-2023 finance bill. So we've gone back to the axe. It's not that we are hanging, no. But there were good things that were meant for manufacturers. Now it is gone again. And so we have to sit down also with the judiciary. While Gen Zs are telling us to sit down, Mr. Speaker, isn't it fair to sit down also with the judiciary? Have a meeting together, not just a meeting, Mr. Speaker. We go for a workshop together now to start looking at all these things that are coming all over. Because we cannot be having the Gen Zs saying we need to see good governance in each arm of government. It means also the judiciary must be now part of that good governance. And you must look at the public also and the interest of the public. You have left the country. We are just sorting out 2023, 2024, 2025. You have taken us now out completely. And so we are saying all the gains we had put even in the other bill, as much as it had a lot of cry, there were issues of excise duty, there were issues of manufacturing, and now we are back to ground zero. And these are some of the things we must sit down. We don't need to complain. We don't need to talk about it on media, but we need to sit as two arms of government and get a better way. Yes, nobody can control the judges in terms of their judgments, but when the country is at a very vulnerable state like this, if we have any arm that is trying to bring us into a situation where you find our country going to the brinks, it will be very unfortunate, very unfortunate. So in the time when things are at the state we are in, we need every person, every arm of government to feel that indeed we are working towards making Kenya better, but also towards appreciating the challenges that we have and making things to work. But not the way we have done, because even the formula we had for university students, the moment you quash all these things, you should be asking yourselves, where have we taken back help? Where have we done this? it is going to affect. So we are pleading with the judiciary. Look at everything as we move. As we move, just know in the education system, there are new systems coming in place. Let us not find ourselves again in the crisis we have been. So, Mr. Speaker, even as I support, I know that the Senate will have to look at this, at what they had passed in Dora, and realize that we have to realign, and the counties must realign, and the governors must realign, so that we move in. I'm hoping nobody again will run to court, because it is a system. I don't know why we are doing all this, but I'm hoping not anyone in the Senate will rush to court or anyone in the counties, but we shall work within the means we have accepted, and we see our country moving in this financial year of 2024-2025, and ensure we put in governance of systems. And I'm hoping the new CS will be able also to look at all these things and bring us also a report just to tell us how our systems, where are we, and look at all the sectors that gives us revenue, KPA and the rest, and ask ourselves to do that. With those few remarks, I beg to support, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. There's a heavy weight on this side, so I'll take two and then come this side. So the Honorable Wilberforce Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support the Division of Revenue Bill, Amendment Bill 2024, that has been stated by factors in which this House is a complicit in the author of our own misfortune. We ought not to have been here. We must have read the signs of time and did the necessary arrangement, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Constitution of Kenya and Article 203 is explicitly clear on what needs to be considered in the allocation of funds between the two levels of government. And one of the two conditions I want to highlight, Honorable Speaker, is that the allocation should be in such a manner that allows the country governments to perform effectively and deliver services to the people of Kenya. Because the hallmark or the thrust of devolution was to enable services to be devolved adequately to the people of Kenya. The question we keep on asking and we will continuously ask until somebody will have the courage to tell us so, is the amount being given to the county governments, is it adequate, is it excessive, or is it inadequate? That's the question we need to ask. Has there been any form of costing of the services to ascertain how much does it cost to provide health care to a particular person? How much does it cost to provide water to a particular person? How much does it cost to provide water or other services to any particular person? If we continue to politicize the process as we have always done, always a grandstanding between the National Assembly and the Senate, we'll forever make decisions politically oriented without having a scientific approach to determining these particular services. And Honorable Speaker, we have always argued, and we have always argued continuously, incessantly and without flinching, that the cost of providing health care in Nairobi cannot be the same cost of providing health care in Seaport. They're completely different. Has there been any scientific approach to determine, or do we just do it for purpose of meeting the spirit and letter of the Constitution just for the political expedience? Honorable Speaker, and I want to challenge the Budget and Appropriation Committee. From where I sit, the Parliamentary Budget Office is well-resourced. The heads are fairly very educated people and experienced people. They can take this research or this develop a model, even if the Commission of Revenue Allocation is only interested in allocating funds between the two levels of government. Honorable Speaker, the other aspect that is very clear in the Constitution is the issue of physical discipline and effective use of resources. I wonder if there's any single time before we do a DORA, whether the committee, Budget Appropriation Committee, ever calls for any report to indicate this is the situation, what we have, this is the amount we have given. Has it been effectively and efficiently used? Do we even, when we do the counter revenue allocation bill, do we ever punish any particular county that has been wasteful in the utilization of public funds, that has not allocated funds as required in the PFM Act between current expenditure and development expenditure, so that we punish those who fail to comply and reward those who comply? Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in the same vein, and Honorable Lachi has mentioned, the county governments were never supposed to be cost centers. What they're supposed to be as well as revenue generating centers. Where does the own source revenue go to, Honorable Speaker? For heaven's sake, why would Nairobi County require money from the Treasury? Why? The land in Nairobi alone, the land rates in Nairobi alone are enough to run the affairs of Nairobi without having to depend on the National Treasury. Are we able to ask those hard questions? Or are we so timid politically that we do not have the courage to ask these questions and get answers, Honorable Speaker? It is time that we get away from this minimalistic approach and this approach that we simply have to do what the Constitution says. Are we able to question? Many of us, if you ask a typical ordinary Kenyan, anytime he recognizes CDF more than county government projects. Why? And considering the CDF is just a very paltry, it's a very small element of the money compared to the funds given to the counties. We must now, time has come, we must interrogate. And I want to ask the chair, Public Accounts Committee, yes, will be put under pressure. Orders will come from the house in the hill. You must comply. But have the courage to even have it in the report, your report, questioning, are we having value for money for the funds that we are allocating to the county governments? Honorable Speaker, I see we are allocating 380 billion to the counties as equitable share, excluding conditional share of the revenue. And we are indicating, Honorable Speaker, that we are providing that when he calculates, it comes to 24.2%. Honorable Speaker, that's not true. And it's good to be very factual and realistic to the people of Kenya. We must be realistic. We have proposed the budget of 2024-2025 based on projected revenue. And the revenue is close to something about 2.2 trillion. If you do a calculation, Honorable Speaker, it is not 24%. Let's be factual and realistic to the people of Kenya. Tell them the truth that we are basically
Order,
doing 17.
Honorable. The chair of budget, this one may require your listening because you may have to speak on it. Proceed.
Chair, I know.
A point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't intend to interrupt my good friend, Dr. Udo, but I think for the sake of informing Kenyans without misleading them, Dr. Udo knows very well the sharing is on audited and approved reports. It's not on the projected revenue. I think it's important to go on record.
Honorable Speaker, and for record purposes, Dr. Makali Mulu knows, and all of us knows, that we already have audited accounts for 2022-2023 that have already been laid before this House. If the House takes inordinately long to review and approve, then you cannot really punish the counties. You cannot proceed to mislead the nation that we are giving them 24%, yet the truth of the matter is far much less than what is just closer, as the chair said, to the floor. We are not even anywhere above the floor. We are just, probably we have just put a carpet to increase the distance from the floor to where it is. So we need to be very clear. And this one we must be very clear. We must call upon the House, and this House is us, to move with the speed.
Did I hear another point of order? Yes. No, I go to the chair budget.
Honorable Chair, when we are in this house in such a day, there are Kenyans at home watching. And when they watch, they take what we say with a lot of weight, because they think, rightly so, that we should be informed as we talk in this house. The Constitution is very clear that when it comes to equitable share, the basis is the last audited financial statements. There is no provision about what time the House should take in approving them. It talks about approved, not the submitted. And therefore, it is proper that we direct our debate in regards to what matters. What matters is approved. What does not matter is the submitted. So that even as Kenyans watch us, they can be able to be informed based on the reality and based on facts. And when it is based on facts, the last audited is 21-22, Honorable Speaker. And in that regard, we are apportioning to counties 24.4%, and that is the reality.
I think that matter can rest there. You may now proceed, Honorable Undo.
So, Chair, let the matter rest there, but it's a point of debate, and I think the people of Kenya have heard me, and probably have to decide whom they want to believe or not. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, Honorable Speaker, it is important as a country that we need to look at how we handle our things. Honorable Speaker, we appropriate each year. We appropriate funds each year. And as I stand here today, and this is based on unverified information, counties have not received close to 30 billion what was appropriated in the financial year 2023-2024. Again, misleading the nation that you have given them a certain percentage, yet the truth of the matter, you have not disbursed all the money. Honorable Speaker, for what purpose is it for us to use unrealistic estimates, revenue projections, or simply decide to frustrate devolution by failing to disburse funds on time? Honorable Speaker, for what benefit is it if you give development funds to the counties on 30th June? For what purpose? They can't absorb it, and the law is very clear of rollback. They can't absorb it. You create pending bills that are artificial or whatever it is. When the funds come, Honorable Speaker, on the last day, the guys in charge in the treasury, the counties, compete to loot the money. Compete to loot the money. Allocate whoever has not done anything. So at the end of the day, when the auditors go, what do they see? Funds were spent. There is no project that was ever undertaken. Or if it was undertaken in such a manner, it adds no value to the people of Kenya. I just hope whoever will get the treasury as the CS for treasury, and I'm praying for Honorable John Mbadi to get, I hope he will have the courage, he will be given the latitude, he will be given the responsibility, he will be given the freedom to instill some sanity in the rotten treasury. Honorable Speaker, those few remarks I support.
The Honorable Joseph McClap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One, I rise to support the Division of Revenue Bill as presented by the Chair of Budget and Appropriation. Mr. Speaker, last week when we were contributing on the Appropriation Bill 2024, Supplementary 1, I said we are living in unique times. These unique times has come as a result of the people of Kenya exercising their legitimate concern through Article 1. The sovereign will of the people of Kenya lies on Article 1. When the people of Kenya decided that the finance bill be rejected, and the president agreed and this House agreed, it comes with consequences. And these consequences, Mr. Speaker, are supposed to be shared across board, across the two avenues on which the Kenyan taxpayers' money are channeled to, the county governments and the national governments. Whereas you've seen reduction for about 3.7 billion in this House, and Kenyans will see that members of parliament have not been able to travel to Mombasa, to hotels even around. We've been oscillating between the Bunge Towers, the Continental House, and the utilities within parliament. That means Kenyans have seen that parliament have complied. Kenyans have complied with the austerity measures as a result of the reduction or the rejection of the finance bill. Those are serious issues. So at the same level that the national government has faced reduction as in judiciary, parliament, and the executive, even the county governments must fall the same reduction. And you can see, Mr. Speaker, that the reduction of 20 billion for the county governments, in this supplementary one that we passed in this House, Mr. Speaker, which is actually the main budget, you can see the figures of national government coming to 410. That 410 is a result of the money that was not able to be, they were not able to get exchequer releases, the 30 billion that was supposed to go to county government. So if you say 380 plus 30, you will get 410. Many people will see it as if there is an increase, but it is not an increase. It is what was not able to be financed being brought forward so that if you add 380 plus 30, it becomes 410. Mr. Speaker, it tells you when we say revenue, division of revenue, and using audited and approved audit accounts of national revenue. What we should be asking as an House, and what we should do, is fast-track the process of the Auditor General to fast-track the process of audited accounts of national revenue, and this House fast-track the process of approval so that now, instead of relying on 2020, 2021, we should now be relying on 2022 or 2023, 2024. So that means if we go in that particular direction, then the amount of money that will go to county governments and even the national governments will rise as a result of using the latest revenue. But if you use the latest revenue 5 years down the line, you will get less money. So why is it that something that we need also to know and the country to know is that perhaps you have a budget, like the one that we had. You have a budget, at the end of the year, there is some money that is not able, National Treasury is not able to release to the county governments. Why? Shortfall in revenue. We should tighten Kenya Revenue Authority so that if we target to raise, for example, 300 or 270 billion shillings, then we should be either there or above or nothing less so that we can get what is required. But as long as we collect less, then we shall have our budget in figures, but in reality the cash flow that goes to the county governments and the national government is less. Two, if we have a lot of litigation on revenue-raising measures, if there is a lot of litigation on bills or acts of parliament that are amended to raise more revenue, are undermined or rejected by the courts, then National Treasury will not have enough money to finance the budget. Hence, you will get shortfall in national exchequer releases, and you will also, as a result, get what is called pending bills, both in county governments, national government. And this is why we are saying it is time that we must also have a conversation with judiciary. Yes, they have the right to make decisions. But, Mr. Speaker, I think as they condemn Parliament for lack of participation, I think one of these days we shall also ask the judiciary to actually, before they make their rulings, take their rulings for public participation, so that they will be able to know what is the feeling of Kenyans on this particular ruling. The uprising in Bangladesh is a result of court ruling. So sometimes the rulings that are done affect the citizens of this country. And it can be a source of an uprising in Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, like the one in Meru, where a ruling is done that jurisdiction to take charge of, Mr. Speaker, these are the consequences. So, one thing that Kenyans need to know from where we sit in this parliament is that the pending bills, the county governments are not able to get all the money. The CDF is not able to get all the money at the end of the financial year because of, one, the KRA is not able to raise all the money that is required as or approved raising measures to collect the money, and two, as a result of litigations that come across. So as a result, you carry another burden of the next financial year to the next financial year. And it will even be worse now that the courts have already pronounced themselves on 2023 finance bill. The chairman of budget should be preparing another supplementary budget, which is another main budget. You know, supplementary one, Kenyans should know, it's not a supplementary, it's the main budget. And as a result of now negating 2023, we may result again in another reduction of the budget, and as a result, the budget committee will have again to prepare another supplementary budget, or we reintroduce finance bill, either in piecemeal or as a whole, so that the country can survive. These are the reality that is facing the country. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, if you look at audited accounts of 2020-2021, the audited and approved is about 1.5 trillion. Mr. Speaker, what about if we could have used 2023-2024? At least the county governments could have gotten more money, everybody else could have gotten more money. But the reality is, even if we do this and we don't get and raise enough as anticipated in the revenue-raising measures, Mr. Speaker, we shall only have a budget in figures, but in reality, we don't have money to run the country. So what do we do in this time, Mr. Speaker? It is a time that the people of Kenya have already expressed themselves through GNC and other authorities. It is time that we must be able to learn to live within our means. I am very sure the influence in the county governments, if county governments were to live within their means and cost their programs, the functions of the county governments, if costed, how much will it cost and how will it develop the country? So, Speaker, when we review this constitution, I am part of the stakeholders of this country that went for the constitutional review 2010. We wanted county governments to create wealth, not become a source of eating areas. We want the county governments to create industries. How do we develop this country, Mr. Speaker? Two things. We increase in our agricultural production. And two, resuscitate our industry so that we build the industrial revolution in Kenya and then grow the agricultural revolution. Those are two things that can improve Kenya and build the economy of Kenya. I will ask you for time, Mr. Speaker, because I have something to share. Mr. Speaker, so this reality that we are facing, Mr. Speaker, is that very soon we may ask the county governments, whatever you raise, and even county governments that have actually been converted to cities. It is time that this house must have a conversation. If you have converted yourself to a city, you can as well run autonomously using your own revenue, like Nairobi, like Mombasa, and those others now can be able to survive. But again, that as...
Very well, good. Order, Honorable McLap. Good speak, but there are strong minds also on the list here. Honorable Karoli Omondi, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I will try to be brief so that our other colleagues may have a bite at the sherry. Let me begin by saying that I think it is time that we relooked at our budget-making process. I think what the courts have told us consistently for the last 24 months is that we have got it wrong. And I think it is time, as a country and as a parliament, we really look at this and figure out how can we rework the legislative framework for budget making in this country so that we don't suffer the continuous embarrassment of having our finance bills declared unconstitutional twice successively. I think it is quite an indictment on Parliament as well as other arms of government. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the concept that both benefit and burden should be shared proportionately as a concept. But when I look at what is being presented here, several issues trouble my mind. One, I see that we are still using the projections contained in the financial year, the Finance Act of 2024-2025, which, as we all know, is dead and buried. Yet, we are basing the 15% calculation, or rather the projections, on that. That worries me. If you look at the way all these things are designed, the counties are actually operating on the last audited accounts of revenues received and approved by this House that are 24 months behind, I think, 2021, 2022. Yet the national government is operating on actuals that are current. So that in itself does not create equity and proportionality when you are sharing the revenues. Secondly, if you look at the way we are proposing that the revenues will be shared and money distributed, how can a county government plan? I think we were a bit quick to dismiss what Honorable Oundo was saying, but if you think about it, 15% is on most recent. In fact, the Constitution, for some reason, didn't say last audited. It said most recent. Most recent could be even 5 years. It simply means the last audited and the last approved by Parliament. Yeah, it could be any audited accounts. Yeah, and if 5 years ago you are raising 1.7 trillion, and last year you raised 2.6 or 2.3 like we did last year, and you're basing your 15% on 5 years ago, you can see the injustice that is being done to the counties. And I'm wondering whether it would be so difficult for the economists and the finance experts in this House to advise us how to share both the 15%, which we have no option about, because that 15% vests as a constitutional provision. So if it is calculated, we have no power to reduce it. We have to avail it to the county governments. But what Honorable Oundo was trying to say was that there's a portion which is based on projections, like what we have now. Now, for that, yes, there should be some equitable share if there's a shortfall. Yeah, but if the monies are never released to the counties on time and in the amounts that are envisaged, how can they plan for their development? I think there's a very fundamental question here that we need to discuss and see whether or not it is time to review both the provisions of Article 203 of the Constitution as well as the framework that we have for budget making, especially as they relate to revenue sharing, division of revenue, and disbursement of funds to the counties. Because if this continues, I can assure you, a very quick look at the current proposals in this particular bill, I can guarantee there will be litigation. And going by recent precedent, we don't know how that will go. And my suggestion would be that this House sits down and relooks at the entire budget-making framework, and we get it right. I think we have good economists, we have good lawyers, we have good finance experts, we have good public sector experts. We need to relook at this process. Otherwise, we will keep going round in circles and never delivering on the promise of devolution. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.